Good morning. Good morning. Hope you all are well. If you tuned into my lecture yesterday, finished kind of the executive branch, talked a little bit. Did I introduce a little bit about the judicial branch?
Yes.
I talked about a dual court system, how we have federal courts and we have state courts, yes?
Yes.
And that 95% of all cases are held at the local level, yes, in municipal or county courts, okay? I want to add just a few more things to this, guys, the federal courts, all right? Pretty much done talking about the local courts. They're pretty self-explanatory. You have civil law, and then you have, am I recording? I am recording. Okay. You have civil law and criminal law. So traffic court is criminal law. If you're suing somebody, you buy something off Craigslist from somebody, and it doesn't work, and they won't give you your money back, you sue them in small claims court. That's civil law. Yes? Okay. In the federal courts, there's civil law and there's criminal law there as well. Okay. And as I said yesterday, only 95% of cases are in the federal courts. Okay. But when we talk about appeals courts and district courts and the differences between these upper courts and lower courts, this court is a trier of fact. So they're going to look at your guilt or innocence. Okay, that's what they're going to look at. You rob a bank, they're going to either find you guilty or not guilty. Yes? Okay, now let's say they find you guilty, all right? And you don't like that decision because they found you guilty. So you can appeal to the circuit court or the appellate courts. Okay. Now let's say one of the reasons they found out that you robbed this bank is because they searched your home and they found the money, but they didn't have a proper search warrant. And the judge in this district court allowed that evidence to be admitted in the trial. And so your lawyers on appeal say, well, they didn't have a proper warrant to search my home and they found this money. That evidence should have never been admitted. And so the appeals court can strike down that earlier case, find you innocent, or they can remand it back for another trial without that evidence. Yes? So these are triers of fact. These two up here, the upper courts, are trier of law. You guys have always heard this thing, well, if you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Okay, so if you can't afford one, the government, the taxpayers pay for a lawyer to defend you. That's called a public defender. Sometimes these aren't the best lawyers in town, if you know what I mean. Okay? Yeah.
Can you be a lawyer for yourself?
Can you represent yourself? Yeah.
It seems like a rather poor idea when you have someone who literally studied in school to do it.
If you are an attorney, maybe you want to, but
I mean, I probably won't.
they generally don't recommend that. Okay, so, okay. I lost my train of thought.
Trial of law.
Trier of law. So you have a defense attorney, right? A public defender. So let's say during your trial here, public defender falls asleep. Were you adequately represented by the state? No. So that is something you would talk about as the trier of the law. So they're going to look at the trial, the behavior of the judge, the behavior of the attorneys, the behavior or what evidence was admitted and not. They're looking at the law, not the facts. You understand? You've already been found guilty. So they're judging whether that trial was fair or not. Okay, so they're not rehashing all the facts. Okay, now if they find you guilty here, you can appeal here. Now, remember how I said there were 24 judges on an appeals circuit court? 3 of those judges will hear this case on appeal. Okay, so they kind of rotate. You know what I mean? Because there's a bunch of cases. Now, for the Supreme Court, guys, there are over 5,000 cases that are petitioned to the Supreme Court every year. These are 9 people. They can't do 5,000 cases. You know what I mean? So they only choose the cases that it's called the rule of 4. Okay? If 4 of the 9 want to hear the case, they'll take the case. Okay? Does that make sense? And I think I mentioned this yesterday. I don't know if I did with you, with the Texas lawsuit. Did I mention that in the lecture yesterday? So, guys, Texas last week sued Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania over the way they held their elections. Joining Texas were 20 other states, including the state of Kansas. Okay, they petitioned directly to the Supreme Court. Now, when we talk about jurisdiction, when one state is suing another state, this is going to be in the federal courts, yes? So the original jurisdiction in most cases begins here. Very rarely will the Supreme Court hear the original case. Okay? And on Friday, guys, the U.S. Supreme Court, only 2 of the 9 justices agreed to hear the case. And so the case was dismissed, the Texas lawsuit. Okay? They said they didn't have standing to sue the other states over their elections. Okay? Which I don't know if I understand that. But maybe they're saying that they should have started in the district court first and worked their way up. There is time consideration here since Inauguration Day is January 20th. Now, what's interesting, guys, these people that are on the federal courts, how long are their terms? For life, until they die, right? They resign, or they retire, or they're impeached. Okay? How many Supreme Court justices Donald Trump appointed in 4 years? 3. None of those 3 asked to hear the case. The 2 justices that did were Thomas and Alito. So Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett all said, we don't want to hear the case. Trump's got to be like, what the heck, man? I just gave you a job for life with a great salary and benefits. You're going to be in all the history books. Your name's going to be in all the history books for posterity. And you can't even hear my case? If nothing shows you the independence of the judiciary, that does. You know what I mean? Once they get confirmed by the Senate, guys, the president has no power over these people. Okay? And Eisenhower once appointed the Chief Justice. His name was Earl Warren in 1954. And he was the Chief Justice from 54 to 69. Eisenhower was a Republican. Earl Warren was the Republican governor of California. Okay, and he became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He turned out to be one of the most liberal justices in the history of the court. And between 53 and 69, many major decisions that were very liberal came down. Okay, now some of those were very important and good decisions. Okay, like Brown versus Board of Education. Okay, that happened in 1954. Okay, Miranda versus Arizona. Okay, that happened during the Warren Court. Okay, but Eisenhower said, that was the biggest mistake of my presidency, was appointing Earl Warren to the Supreme Court. Okay, and I said he appointed him as Chief Justice. If there's a vacancy, so say John Roberts is the Chief Justice, he replaced Rehnquist, who was the Chief Justice. So Roberts is now the Chief Justice. If he retires, dies, or quits, the president is in office can appoint one of the 8 as Chief Justice, or they can use their pick. So the newest member on the court could be the Chief Justice. And that was the case with Roberts. When Bush appointed him, that was the vacancy, was the Chief Justice spot. He could have appointed one of the other 8 to be the Chief Justice and just made him an Associate Justice. but you can make them the Chief Justice. I don't know if did I explain that well?
Who's it?
John Roberts. Okay. So guys, what's special about the Chief Justice? Nothing too much that's special about it, other than when they're writing their opinions, the Chief Justice will often be able to say which justice gets to write the majority opinion. Okay, which opinions is something we're going to talk about in a second. Okay. All right, so you got trier of fact, trier of law. Now, I brought up Brown versus Board of Education. All right. You guys know about that? Right there, you know, Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Which Board of Education are we talking about? Topeka, Kansas. Okay. Now, so in 1896, okay, there was a Supreme Court case called Plessy versus Ferguson, right? Okay. Now, Plessy versus Ferguson was about segregation. That you could have separate facilities, separate schools, separate drinking fountains, restrooms, hotels, restaurants, seating on buses, train cars, all that. And it would be equal. Okay? So they said separate is equal. Now this was an 8-1 decision. So one of the justices dissented. Okay, and wrote a dissenting opinion. Okay, so you have three types of opinions. You have the majority opinion. Okay, and if the Chief Justice is in the majority, like he votes with the majority, he gets to choose who writes the opinion. Because all 9 of these judges, or in this case, 8 of them, agreed that separate is equal. So the Chief Justice would pick the one that had the best argument. Okay, now obviously, guys, today, based on what you know, separate but equal violates which amendment? What number? 14. Okay, but they were saying it didn't violate the 14th Amendment. Equal protection under the law for all citizens. Okay, but one of them wrote a dissenting opinion. His name was Justice John Harlan. Okay? Now, there is a third type of opinion called concurring. Now, the concurring opinion is I agree with the majority, but for different reasons. I think that separate is equal because of the 5th Amendment. It doesn't violate the 5th Amendment, okay, for different reasons. I concur with the majority, which could be important, but the most important opinion is the majority opinion because it becomes this, the precedent. Okay, so from here on out, you can have segregation and it's legal. It's a guiding principle. This is telling state governments, local governments all over the country, you can separate your people based on race. It's legal. Okay? So, Justice Warren comes in 1953, and in 1954, Brown is the father of 3 young schoolgirls. He's African American. He lives in Topeka. Now, guys, all across this country, in towns that there was a disparity of wealth, you had poor people and you had wealthy people. Generally, the towns were divided by the railroad tracks. On one side of the railroad tracks is where the wealthy people live. On the other side of the railroad tracks is where the poor people live. So the poor people, disproportionately African American minority, would go to a school over here. Now, how do we fund our schools? Well, there's money from the state government. Back then, there was no money from the federal government. But most of the funding comes from what type of taxes? Property taxes. So if you look at property taxes in Wichita versus Goddard, Goddard has much higher property taxes than Wichita, because if you were to tax the property at a higher rate, you're taxing the poor. And so property values are lower in Wichita, except in Eastboro, which is its own town, right? Or College Hill, they have, you know, some nice houses down there, than they are in the suburbs. So the suburbs can raise taxes because people can afford to pay more in taxes to build nicer schools, to pay teachers more, and so forth, yes? So these schools aren't equal on the wrong side of the tracks. Everybody knows it. Now, if you lived in a town like Newton during this era, everybody was poor. There were very few wealthy people. My mom was born in Rolling Fork, Mississippi in 1940, a small, poor town on the Mississippi River. So she was going to school in the late 40s and early 50s in Mississippi. Everybody was poor. She went to school with everybody. Black, white, it didn't matter. Because they were all poor. So I look back at her yearbook. This is Mississippi, guys. This is the deep South. You ever heard of seen the movie Mississippi Burning? Oh my gosh. Well, some of my history students read the book The Help. Have you guys seen the movie The Help? Okay. So that's Mississippi, right? But that's Jackson, Mississippi. In Jackson, they have wealthy people and they have poor people. One side of the tracks, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like this in every community, but in your larger cities, you know, bigger, you know, they don't have to be huge cities, but your bigger towns, you're going to have two schools, okay? And Brown stood up for his daughters and said, this isn't right. This is not equal, okay? And the NAACP brought this suit on behalf of Brown, okay? Now, this is Topeka, Kansas, Brown versus Board of Education. Now, thankfully, guys, this was a 9-0 decision. Because integrating our schools is going to be difficult enough. The fact that they were unanimous was huge. Okay, because if this was a divided court 5-4, it would have made it even more harder than it was. And guys, this would take years, decades to integrate our schools. Okay. Now, what's cool about this story, though, the Supreme Court doesn't like to overturn earlier courts. They don't like to do that. Why? What are they saying about the earlier court? They're wrong. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't understand the Constitution. These people were inept. They don't like to do that. Okay, now not all the court cases are like this important. You know what I mean? This is like a huge one. All right. And so when they do overturn an earlier court, they like to use this opinion. Because they're saying that somebody on the court got it right. There was only one, Justice Harlan. What's cool about this story, the guy that writes the majority opinion in Brown versus Board of Education is a guy named John Marshall Harlan. His grandson. So he affirms his grandfather's dissenting opinion almost 60 years later. Grandpa got it right. And Harlan, mind you, was a conservative justice. Okay. I wrote a big paper. I took a class in graduate school just on the Warren Court. Those 16 years when he was the Chief Justice. Okay. And I had to pick one of the 9 to write a research paper on. And I chose John Marshall Harlan. Okay. And stumbled across this story that I wanted to share with you. Okay. Now, while we're talking about conservative justices and liberal justices, okay, we talk about, I'm going to erase this, okay. And yes, they were saying it violated the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, for sure, okay. But remember, ladies, when we did I have this discussion with you guys about your protections under the Constitution?
No, it's the other side.
Okay, I don't, okay, so the fact that we have separate restrooms at the end of the hallway, okay, separate is not equal. Okay, so in reality, guys, ladies, guys, you do not have the same protections as everybody else. Now, we have laws that protect you. But when it comes to like equal pay for equal work, there's nothing in the Constitution that protects you. Okay? It's just not there. Because of Brown versus Board of Education. Yes.
I had someone say, like, I had someone like remark on the wage gap that, yeah, it's great if all women were paid less than men, but we don't have a woman.
Right. Now, the wage gap, guys, I don't want to start a fight here. Okay? But listen, I'll start on the positive end of this, okay? So gentlemen, or I'll just ask everybody, how many in your household, mom makes more than dad? You don't have to answer, but you can. Okay, we've got 3 of us.
Oh, my mom.
Okay, we've got 4 of us, okay? Because I told you about my wife, right?
Yeah,
She's the engineer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, with an MBA. Yeah. So my wife makes a lot more than I do. Okay, now, gentlemen, if my wife makes less than the guy sitting across from her that has the same experience, same education as my wife, who's that hurting? It's hurting me. Right? Same thing with you guys. You know what I mean? It affects you. It affects families. Okay? So, now, when you look at college today, and guys, most high earners in this country have college degrees. Okay? Now, you can start your own plumbing business without a college degree and do very well for yourself. Yes? You don't have to have a college degree. But, are there more women in college than men in college? By far. Our education set up in this country is set up for girls. It's not set up for boys. The way we educate our students. It's just not. I teach honors classes. Okay? There's a whole heck of a lot more girls in my class than guys in my class. Okay? This reading, this writing, this sitting in a desk for 7 hours a day is not set up for boys. We are different. Okay? Now, are, on average, boys better than girls at math and science?
I don't think
Am I allowed to say that? Is it an interest thing? No, don't get me wrong. My wife's an engineer, and she's very good at math and science. Okay? And I wasn't. But I'm saying on average, what do you think? There's no difference? Or is it an interest thing for girls? Not that they're better.
I don't know.
Okay, I have a comment.
Because girls are like, oh, here, play with this doll. Boys play with this Lego. Oh, okay. The boys are already thinking about that.
Okay, wait, this is really interesting because I watched this TED Talk about this.
Okay, what did TED Talk say?
Okay, so there was this lady who was an engineer and she said that since girls were growing up playing with dolls and guys were playing with
That's how
guys
it
were
used to be. Now
playing with more like engineering type toys than girls were. That's what I saw the thing. But like I don't necessarily I think
I don't know how that helps you with like calculus.
it's just like the fundamentals.
How your mind thinks.
Yeah, it's the fundamentals.
Yeah.
How you're raised, like,
It's just
I was
based on
raised to very, like, I wasn't raised to get fitted. Like, I was raised to find a husband.
Okay. Yeah, so like I have a daughter that doesn't have my DNA, right? So she's math and science. She's not English. Some of you guys are math and science, not English, ladies?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's just based on how you're raised. Because like my entire family is math and science. We also can do English. Like.
But see, here's the thing with Lily. I mean, we just sent her to school. I mean, like, she didn't need help. She's never needed help. You know what I mean? My son needs help. Still. I know. I know. So I do. I agree. And so, okay. So if there's more women in college, and what types of jobs pay more? Okay, so if there's fewer women, now, are we stopping women from getting into engineering?
No, but no, I think.
What, it's what?
It's a lot harder.
How's it harder?
I don't think
In
it's.
a STEM class, it's like 16 boys to 1 girl.
No, I don't think
I'm
it's
in a computer
necessarily.
class, I'm the only girl in that class.
But having-
This semester.
Well, how do you
I'm
feel
doing
about,
great.
what about when there's only one boy in my honors government class?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily harder.
What about
What
two
about it
Because,
makes it
like,
harder?
boys
I'm talking about, like,
in
Paul.
honors English?
Yeah,
Like, I just
but
saw,
what about
like-
it makes it harder?
Yeah, but as far as finding a job, if you're a female engineer,
I think
you're gonna get grabbed up.
No, yeah, I agree with you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I get emails all the time saying.
Oh, yeah, same with college, like when you talk about minority students, they're getting grabbed up over white kids.
Yeah,
There's
it's like,
nothing for white men.
yeah, I.
No, take it back. Me?
I
No,
get
you can get it. It's like.
offered, like, there's schools that like.
There's the can of
Yeah.
worms.
They just
It's
don't.
open.
They like,
There are just a lot more.
no, I feel like there's a lot more women get grabbed.
Because there wasn't any.
Okay.
No, I agree with you. Like, it's
Hey,
like,
hang on a second. Let me defend him for a second, okay? Look, white men have been the target of bashing in this country for the last 20 years. Listen, do you know what the number one group of people that commit suicide in this country is?
White men, because mental health
The
and men is not
majority of homeless people
Because
are
they're-
white men.
we're also the majority of the America.
No, you are.
The way older
The
generations.
plurality.
were raised was men are supposed to do the work. They're not supposed to talk about emotions. Women are all about emotions. So men were not, the mental health was never prioritized with men. Now that we're starting to switch it.
Men are expected.
Yeah, but we're evil. Especially the white Christian men are just, we're the most, we're battered upon.
That doesn't
Okay,
just
that
go
we
back.
are misogynistic, we look down, we're racist,
Not until you prove
women
that
need
you
to be
are.
in their place. That's not how white men are. Now, are there some white men like that? But that's how we're perceived in society today. Turn on the TV. I mean, white men, and especially Christian men, get bashed on more than anybody. They're fair, open season. Okay, and I think in this country, women have it better than most countries in the world by far.
Yeah.
The opportunities for women in this country are incredible. All right.
I think it's.
What are we talking about? How did I get on? Okay, I wanted to talk about one more thing.
I like this conversation.
I want
I
to,
think that it is unfair that white Christian men get assumed too quickly that they are racist,
Yes.
misogynistic, homophobic. But I think that a big part of why people are so skeptical about them because there has been
Years.
history.
years of white
History.
men
Yeah.
getting away with that
Yeah.
crap and not getting
Right. Right. Yes, but we've changed. We've all changed.
But like Whitney
I say good when I said there's nothing for.
I mean, in a lot of that change has happened in the last 20 years. Yes.
Just because white men are battered upon doesn't change the fact that there are almost no repercussions. Like,
Yeah.
What you mean repercussions?
repercussions like black men are like the whole like Black Lives Matter thing. Like people have repercussions for being black, people have repercussions for being women, but white men don't have repercussions. They just get
Like,
yelled at.
it's just the history of white men being on top all
Like,
the
you're not gonna
time.
get-
We're still getting over that curve of white men get away with everything. White men. I don't want to.
Now, if you're talking about the justice system, okay, if you're talking about the justice system, I agree with you.
Yes.
I think the justice system still needs lots of reform, no question. Okay,
I believe that everyone is upon.
but I think as we talk about us as human beings, okay, and how we treat each other, I think that this country, which is the most diverse country on the planet, by far, religion, race, national origin, we get along really well as a society. I mean, the interactions between white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Muslims, Christians, atheists, every day there are hundreds of millions of interactions between diverse groups of people in this country. And 99.999% of those interactions happen without any issue. As soon as there's an issue, who blows it out? Who makes it a huge deal? The media. Dividing us further than actually pointing out the good in us and how we treat each other. Okay, when you talk about white Christian men or Christians in general and how much they give to charity and how much they care for other people as Christians and what we help to try to do for a better society, okay, they don't get that benefit. We don't get that benefit of the doubt, Christians. Okay, we get, no, you're homophobic because you believe in the Bible. Okay, you're anti this, you're anti that. Okay, and that men and women are different, so we must be misogynistic. I just feel like it's time for payback against white men. Okay, now we deserve some of that. Okay, but if you look at us today, we're different than we were 20 years ago. Look, you guys know, okay, you figured out my politics. Okay, now listen, I have come so far on my politics when it comes to things like homosexuality and transgenderism. It's like, hey, it doesn't affect me. I'm not going to stop you from living your life. No, 20 years ago. Hey, listen. Did you know in 2008 when Barack Obama ran for president, he was against gay marriage?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the Democratic Party. When Hillary ran in 2008 against Barack Obama, she was against gay marriage. Okay, so things have changed across the country from all political spectrums. And if you look at Trump, okay, as far as comes to LVG,
There you go.
okay, yeah,
ABC.
the most gay-friendly Republican president there's ever been, by far. Right, right.
It's not like, I have a question about the gay marriage thing. Wouldn't that be considered one of our like natural rights where it's not, if it's not directly put in the Constitution, we should be able to do it anyways?
Well, that's what the Supreme Court said.
So why was it such a problem for so long?
Because of the Judeo-Christian belief that runs through this country for 200 years, where,
was a
Where- huh?
The point of the Constitution, well, like the reason why we broke off from the UK or England
Yeah.
was because we wanted a separation of religion and state. So why is the religion?
That doesn't mean that religious people can't serve in government and their beliefs are going to affect their decisions.
I thought part of their like, part of the reason why they're part of like the judge or whatever is because they won't let their religion affect their way to vote because they're attacking.
Of course, your religion is part of who you are. It's going to affect the way you vote.
So why were they attacking, who was it, for being Catholic and they didn't want her?
Yeah.
And then she was like, I promise I won't let my Catholic believe.
Well, they did the same thing with JFK, right? They said he's going to listen to the Pope. He's going to take orders from the Pope when he became president. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. He doesn't take orders from the Pope, okay? But it's our society. Our society had to change. So when we first started, guys, in 1776 and before that, where we had slavery, okay, under British rule, the society's thoughts and European thinking, white European thinking, was that it was okay to enslave people. Okay? In fact, you know, the slaves that were sold to the white man were sold by black men. So they thought it was okay. So attitudes change, just like with gay marriage. Okay? And when we talk about the civil rights movement, okay, it took a long time. You know what I mean? We had it in place with the 14th Amendment. We had it in place, equal protection, but we didn't carry it out. So this is something where the Declaration says all men are created equal. This is a promise that we're still trying to fulfill to this day. You know what I mean? It's not a perfect society. It never will be. Okay, but we're trying to get there. And we've made great strides in that way as a nation. Hi.
Hi, I need to break this up, but are we talking about the final tomorrow?
Yes, I will be reviewing on the final. So you'll want to watch that video.
Thank you.
There's one more thing I want to talk about.
Oh, I got angry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this goes right along with it. Okay.
Yeah. No, she's there. And you play Monopoly.
You guys heard this? Ferris teach you about this? Yeah. So the three justices that Trump appointed were which one? Strict constructionists. Okay. So strict constructionists try to follow exactly what the original intent of the Constitution was. If they can't figure that out, they can go to Madison, Hamilton, and Jay in the Federalist Papers to try and figure out what is meant by this. Okay? Loose constructionists, if you've heard this term, the Constitution is a living, breathing document. Okay? That should be interpreted with today's times. Okay? And so when you get the gay marriage ruling a few years ago by the Supreme Court, or you get Brown versus Board of Education in '54, what you're seeing is an adjustment to society. Okay? With the Constitution. All right. Are these rights explicit to gay marriage in the Constitution? No. In fact, marriage laws are controlled by whom? States. Okay. So there is a debate over, like, say, marijuana laws, right? So with marijuana laws, it's a federally banned substance. Okay. Well, a conservative might say, well, then let the states decide, just like with the speed limits, right? You have marriage licenses that for gay people and for straight people in your state. If you don't want to live in that state, you can move to a different state. And then some would say, well, wait a second. This is a human rights issue. It's a civil rights issue. This should be handled by the federal government because it protects all people. Yes, not just people living in your state. Okay, so this is all the balance of how our system works, right? So conservatives tend to be very much in favor of federalism for states to make their own decisions, okay? And some liberals agree with that on things like with marijuana laws, right? So I think as we move forward in this country, there's going to continue to be this tug of war between strict construction, loose construction, between national laws and state laws, and who gets to make those decisions for how we live our lives, okay? It's an imperfect system, but I think it's probably the best system you can have, okay? We can debate the merits of the Electoral College, and if enough people say that, you know, we need to do away with it and go to the popular vote and become more democratic rather than Republican, then we will change the Constitution to merit that. But that's the only way you're going to change the Electoral College is to change the Constitution because it's part of the Constitution. Okay? So one last thing, state Supreme Court, state appeals courts, and then local courts. If you don't like your decision here, can you appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court? No. If you don't like your decision here, can you appeal to the Supreme Court? No. If you don't like your decision here, you can appeal here. If you don't like your decision here, can you appeal to the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Yes. Depends on the case. Okay? Has to be an issue dealing with the law, the Constitution, or the federal government. Okay? Hi.
I have another question. Okay, it's about marijuana.
Okay.
Why don't they just legalize it and tax it So that would create another industry, and then anyone who's in prison or on just marijuana charges, they get dropped, and then all of those people,
That's-
no money spending on them.
That's the exact law or bill that the House passed 2 weeks ago. The Senate, I don't know if they brought it up. It might be in committees, they might be studying it, I don't know. You could see it come up. I don't know if Mitch McConnell will bring it up. If you get Democrats win those 2 seats in Georgia, you're gonna get a new majority leader, probably Chuck Schumer. Would he bring it up? Yes. Would you get past a filibuster? Maybe. I mean, definitely Rand Paul from Kentucky, who's a libertarian, he would vote in legalization to overturn the federal law. Personally, I feel they should overturn the federal law because I think it's a state's issue. And states can pass their own laws. And there, in the end, there may be just a couple islands on the 50 where you can move and there's no legal pot. You know what I mean? Like Kansas. Right? Because Oklahoma's already went to medical. Yeah.
On the same topic, if you check out how Canada has done it, they actually did open it up and tax it.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the black market is still open for the person to express opinion on that.
Yeah.
It's now $16 to buy something I'm gonna spend $5 on. I know the lower quality.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the pricing in like Colorado and stuff. It does help destroy the black market. What about growing your own? Would that be legal?
You've got to have, I think you got to have.
It's really high maintenance.
It's a weed. It's a freaking weed. It's easy to grow. You just throw some seeds in the
It's
dirt.
not going to be that good though.
Now, the problem is getting your hands on the seeds. So you might have a problem with the black market with seeds. Well, the illegal drug trade is the black market. Yeah.
What is the main reason that they're so afraid of legalizing weed? Is it just because of
Youth.
the youth? Okay, well,
Children.
it's a lot easier for me to get alcohol right now, and alcohol, a lot more people die from, like, no one actually has died from.
Oh yeah, you don't have to convince me. I know. There's a lot of. My son just wrote a big research paper on this, and I helped him write it. Okay? I helped him write the part on federalism. Okay, but no. So we looked up, all the arguments, and so forth. I think I worry about kids. You know what I mean? The easier the access, the more it filters down to your middle school kids. You know what I mean? Now, I know most of you guys in here, if you wanted to have a joint for the weekend, you know where to get a joint. Yes.
There's also a lot of parents who allow their kids to drink at 14 because they all started drinking at 14, but
Crazy.
not a lot of kids or parents let their kids start smoking at 14. But smoking weed doesn't have any physical, if you get, it's not an addictive substance, you get addicted to the feeling it gives you.
That's
Alcohol,
literally what addictive.
and then there are no physical
addicted to your
drawbacks
phone.
from
Are you saying addictive? I don't know. But gateway drug? Oh, come on. Now that could be changing. That could be changing because so many people are on pills.
Every person will have like the neighbors.
Look, some people can function just fine on weed. Some people can't. I don't want my kids finding out in the 6th grade whether they can do it or not.
People can also function perfectly fine on alcohol. I mean, some people can't.
It has its effects. Right. Look, I'm with you. Listen,